that, but for now, you can go for it.
Hey folks, good morning. We got about 66 participants in this call. Welcome everyone. This is the Adobe Experience Manager Champion Office Hours. We're going to be talking about tips, tricks, and best practices for everyone on this call. Thank you again for joining us. We're going to quickly review our agenda. So if you want to go to the second slide, Max. Today we're going to be talking about first we're going to take a look at what is the Adobe Champion program, part of which is this office hours that you are seeing here. Obviously we're going to provide some Adobe Experience Manager Champion introductions, and we'll get to the pre-submitted questions so we can answer those questions that you submitted already for us, and we're going to talk about them here. As well as later on go to any of our live questions that you might have. Feel free to jump in the chat as well and let us know where you're calling from. And we'll wrap it up around in about an hour, and we'll follow with next steps, what's happening with the program, any updates we might have, and let you know when the next one of the office hours is coming up. So without further ado, about the AEM Champion program, the summary here. We are a bunch of different roles, partners, clients. We work with everyone on the Adobe product team and Adobe product leaders to share our technical expertise, best practices, and strategies with the broader community, part of which is this office hours here. And thank you for joining us again. The benefits of the program, obviously knowledge sharing, like what we do here. We network with experts and practitioners like you and developers from around the world who develop in Adobe Experience Manager. We like to collaborate and grab every chance we can to work with Adobe product leaders to improve the Adobe Experience Manager platform, and we get to work with them to see product sneak peeks, and we engage with the Adobe product team, but also with other practitioners, and we have exclusive speaking opportunities, content creation, and Adobe Experience League and other blogs, and of course promote our personal branding opportunities wherever that is possible. So on our next slide, we're going to look at our today's panelists for today. I think last time I went from left to right. We're going to go right to left. Yep. So the folks who you're seeing here today, and we're going to be part of the conversation from left to right. I'm sorry, from right to left is Martin Noble. Martin is joining us from the UK. Good afternoon, Martin. Go ahead.
Yeah, hi guys. Yes, I'm based in the UK. CTO for XO, so we're part of IBM. Yeah, just great to talk to you guys.
Thank you, Martin. Next is Venkatesh. Hi, Venkatesh.
Hey, hi all. Hi everyone. I'm joining from Qatar. I'm multi-solution architect in Qatar Airways. I'm holding the Adobe platform for Qatar Airways. Have wide experience in AEM and integration with AEM products as well. Happy to join.
Thank you, Venkatesh. And our awesome Jessica Zweifel. Hi, Jessica.
Hi. Yes, so I'm Jessica Zweifel. I'm a senior web designer at Insight. So happy to be on the panelist today.
Awesome. Thank you for joining us. Max is joining us all the way from Australia.
Hi, guys.
Hey, Max.
Good day. Good day, guys.
Yeah, good day to you.
It's top of the morning right now. It's 12:30. I'm CTO from Ancora. I've been doing AEM for a while now. I'd like to get amongst everyone and get in the action and help out where I can and share my knowledge.
Appreciate it. Thank you very much, Max. And myself, Greg Demeris, I'm a web content product owner here at T. Rowe Price, and I'm joining you from Baltimore, Maryland this morning. So yeah, on the next slide, we wanted to give you a chance before we start taking your questions to scan the QR codes here, first of all, to join the group channel, the YouTube channel that we have, so you can see our past recordings if you want on demand, and go to the YouTube channel. So take a minute to scan the QR codes here on the screen, and as well as look at our Champion Office Hours website, where we host these meetings and we send out the invitations from. So we're gonna move on to the questions next, and we can start with. I think we'll go to Venga. If you wanted to kickstart it with the content fragments, multi-field and nested multi-fields question, Venkatesh, did you want to take that on?
Yeah, so the question was like, can we use multi-field or nested multi-field in content fragments? So the content fragments, the recommended best practices is normally like don't nest, like go with the multi-field inside the multi-field. They also have something called references. You can actually create a granular fragments and then reference it, so that you can combine multiple content fragment into one single model itself. But if you still, there are use cases where I can come across in different areas where instead of creating multiple content fragments, can I have to use the multi-field inside it? Definitely with the custom thing, yes, it is possible. What you can actually do is like just think of from normal, like how we are using a Coral multi-field, and you combine that with the JavaScript object of the content fragment object, which is window.efm, is the one which is holding all the fields of a content fragment model when you're editing it, right? So what you can do is combine this and inject it into that object, and then you can easily do the manipulation accordingly. Maybe I can ping you the JavaScript object, which is responsible to hold all these objects within the content fragment model. And you already aware, if you are working in AEM, you know how to use the Coral multi-field, composite multi-field, right? So you can combine this and this together. And there are content fragment APIs also available from the backend to access this parent object, and then you can traverse each of the fields. So that way you can do it. I'll ping you the CFM object which you can use to do that. But always remember, content fragment is more of like a structured content where it can be like a granular. Think of like to the bottom, top to down approach. It will always work like that. So you have reference and you can reference multiple fragments, but until otherwise really the customization required, go for it.
Yeah, I guess, and I definitely second that, is that, yeah, if you can't do it using the sort of out of the box sort of official references and things like that, you definitely can customize, but you're definitely into your deep customization of the functionality. But if you do have a specific use case that needs that for some reason, that it doesn't make sense to do nesting and those kind of things, that actually building it in, there's no reason why you can't use those APIs and kind of extend the functionality, and that's something we've done for some clients as well.
Got it. All good points.
Greg, I've posted the links on the screen into the channel chat as well, so in case people want to just click on it on desktop.
Thank you, Max. Yep. Let's move on to our next question real quick. This is more about the future of the authoring experience in Adobe Experience Manager. We have a couple of different updates from Adobe. One of them is next gen composability and Project Franklin Helix. Did you guys want to weigh in on this?
Yeah, we can weigh into it. Yeah, I mean, I suppose that's something that we ourselves starting to get into as well. Obviously, we're AEM experts, but for us, for example, we need to have a quick website so we can share content with the industry.
Yep.
And for us, we can go down the route of getting AEM instance, which we will do as well at some point to be able to demonstrate to the community how to do things in AEM. So if somebody wants to see something, we can quickly pop up a version and show something. But for us, be able to quickly compose content and post it on a website without having to have the infrastructure is fantastic. So you will see our Franklin website in our GitHub repository, so that you can copy it for yourself and see how it's customized. And we also have a content which is also will be shared on the GitHub on a Google Drive, which you can use. Definitely very refreshing.
Yeah, and I just wanted to add on the client side, since I'm on the client side, I know that Adobe, the product team, is working, and a lot of the account reps are working with the client side to get into use cases and understand might be appropriate for next gen composability to use. So I think a lot of the clients are into this pilot phase right now where we're looking into next gen composability. So that you might be seeing a lot more of that.
Okay. There are a few more points. I think like Adobe has strategies in multiple positioning themselves into the composability. One is the Project Franklin, which is the Helix mode of doing things. The other one they are now coming up with is like a universal editor concept. Right, so I just put it into the chat as well, the high-level architecture which they are explaining. With that one, predominantly like what they are trying to do is like you don't need AEM to manage the content. How that works is like you will have like a DOM decoration. You will write as a DOM decorations, and you will actually using an URL mount point. You will tell saying that which author it has to go and then fetch the content from. So based on that, what it will do is like you can have the URL with the DOM decoration enabled and put it into Experience Cloud. Like if you are using already Adobe Target and all, you will see the Visual Composer, right? The similar way, you will just put the URL and it will automatically put the blue box or in context editing of each of the component where all the DOM decoration has been added. And then you can update it there itself. What it will do in the backend is the Experience Cloud will talk to your author, and then it will write into a content fragments. It will persist the data, and then you click a preview and you publish it. The content fragments will push to the publishers. So that is, I think, it is in the beta. Maybe like in next few months, you will see like how this is going to be effective. Currently, I think they are their roadmap is with the their purposes within AEM JCR content repository, and then their thought processes they will extend it to Word. It's purely going to be a technology agnostic. So that is how it is going on.
Yeah, that makes sense. Thank you for those updates, Megat. Yeah, so let's. I have a couple of questions here in the chat section. Can experience fragments having both CSS, JavaScript interactive behavior be consumed by non-AEM applications?
This is Srini here. Hi, Greg.
Yeah, hi, Srini.
Yeah, go ahead.
So
go ahead, Max.
Yeah, go ahead, Srini.
I just want to. Yeah, this is the use case where, like, I know that experience fragments can be consumed by AEM applications because those are AEM applications and it's easy. But we, as a customer, like having like a lot of instances where they say like they have a React application which is completely like JavaScript based application, and they're saying like, okay, I want an omni-channel experience, and and they create an experience fragment which not only has CSS, right? It also has JavaScript. And they wanted that JavaScript behavior as well to come onto those React applications. And you see, whenever we get this whole HTML into another React page DOM, it only takes the CSS and it only runs the CSS and HTML. It won't evaluate the JavaScript. And iframes is not an option for the customers. It's a 1990s and a lot of security in features, or a lot of vulnerabilities, right? So they're not okay with the iframes. So
Okay.
Is there any
Okay.
like anyone?
So if you ask me, in my personal opinion, so when you have a different technology agnostic, right? So you are creating have experience fragment in AEM, right? And then you are having a React and you are trying to import it there, right? There are two things that you need to consider. If the branding is going to be same across your AEM page as well as in your React, right? Which means your technology stack is also same across. For example, you are using Bootstrap here, there also you are using Bootstrap, or you are using here JavaScript, maybe a different library that is also going to be used the same library. You won't see the side effect, right? You can actually like put it in a way that you can update the experience fragment and give the URL to them. They can call as an accessor, like an Ajax kind of a script, and then they'll get the HTML, and then they can inject, or they can sanitize that HTML, and accordingly they can manipulate or add the CSS and inject it. But if you think of an Adobe best practice way, that is not that is used for, right? You for always a single page applications, think of a content fragments where you have a raw content, right? So you won't have a design side effects. You always don't you need to think of it saying that, okay, someone is changing an experience fragment, whether it will impact or not, because that sanity no one will provide when you are using an experience fragment directly injecting into a React, right? So the best way is, if you are consuming an omni-channel, the same experience, whatever you are going to build in experience fragment, can be derived in content fragment as well. Ultimately, the end of the day, they want to use is like the content to be managed, right? And then they can just get the content and inject it. Even some of the CSS, like you want to add the raw CSS and all those things, there is a provisioning already available in content fragment as well. You can add that, and then you can inject it. But experience fragment normally used like pushing into target, or you have a page and you want to like create a fragment out of it, and then it is having the same brand, same CSS everywhere, and you want to like put it into different places. That's where experience fragment is much more useful in life.
Yeah, I would actually bring it. I'll add to you. Yeah, experience fragments is made to make pieces of a page. You shouldn't put CSS into it. Just the note on the iframes. Yeah, I wouldn't put the iframes to bed. I mean, they're much more sandbox than a page themselves. So iframes are very much alive, and they will continue being alive because they provide functionality you can't get with anything else, like with any of these kind of new JavaScript frameworks. So yeah, so if you want to have iframes or pages, for example, use it for forms. If you're using AEM forms, you use iframes for that. There's a good reason for that, yeah, because the way you manage a form is very different to a normal page. So you have to use iframes so that you should, because you can isolate that. You can make sure it's sandbox. You're not going to get people snooping data in your iframe, which you would in a normal page. So yeah, experience fragments are meant to be giving you a way to create little snippets of a page you can add into an actual final page. It's not meant to be for delivering CSS and JavaScript. You just might as well make a page for that. Yeah, and have some other tools using like Sling methods where you can create subpage and loading up other content. And you could do that. Yeah, just like an editor in AEM, which you can have editor URL with sub content. You could do something like that. That's how you would go about doing some sort of custom mechanism for bringing CSS and HTML into like content, yeah. But yeah, content fragments were mentioned before. Yeah, it should be the thing you're using for your multi-channel. If it's just going to be web-based, which is CSS, JavaScript, HTML, that stack, you might as well just do a responsive site and where you go. And those tools are, well defined and used now. So you can use all the extent of HTML for that. You don't have to skip out on different tags and stuff.
Yep, makes sense. Good. We got 2 more questions in the meeting chat, but I wanted to address one of the bigger keynote topics, content structure. And that was a pre-submitted question, kind of all-encompassing. I think we were going to kickstart that conversation with Martin talking about content structure. Yep.
Yeah, so it's fairly open topic, but yeah, I think potentially the area interested is like how do you set up your content and how do you build that structure and how do you define it? But you kind of have to drill into that to thinking about the difference between like information architecture and content architecture. So how do you actually structure the like the output of the website for people to consume and use it, but also how do you store that content in a way that content authors can actually manage it and use it? And you need to be looking at all sorts of things like how do we create the content? How do we make it searchable? And a lot of that, the most important thing is about planning from the beginning and not underestimating like the effort and scale and of the complexity of that problem, that it shouldn't be an afterthought of, okay, we're just going to concentrate on building an amazing looking website, but actually you should be expending similar, as much effort on thinking about how you're going to structure the site or the content for the end users, but also how you're going to make it so that the content authors can actually manage that content. A lot of that's going to involve input from different places, so things like UX and UI people, content strategy teams, or user research, information from your existing sites if you're doing migrations. Also from the developers, but also from the content creators, because everybody kind of needs to be involved in that process to make sure that everything's going to be set up in a way that's going to be good for the end users, but is also going to be good from the content authoring perspective. Because if the content authors can't create the content, then the end users aren't going to be able to see it.
Right.
And some of it comes down to things like how you set up your taxonomy for like in sites and assets and tagging and those kind of structures as well. So there's a lot of stuff to think about and plan in there. And I guess the most important point is just to not underestimate what you need to do and the amount of sort of planning and things that need to go into that. And it definitely shouldn't be an afterthought, which I think sometimes it can end up being. Content is the last thing that's thought about, when that's because you've got nice designs and you've got sort of placeholder content, but you haven't thought about the real content or how you're actually going to create that real content, and also how you're going to make it so that the content authors can create it continuously. And particularly if you're looking at things like personalization or those kind of areas where just the sheer scale of content creation just goes up. So you need to think about how you're going to structure and store different variations of content, or you're going to have how you're going to break down the way in which you structure your assets and things. But if you've got different assets for different regions or different assets for different groups and those kind of things, just to kind of ensure that the content is set up in a way that end users are going to be able to access it, but also the content authors are going to be able to find it and work with it well.
Hey Martin, this is Robert. I'm wondering, to piggyback off of that, do you have any best practices or methodologies or file structures, maybe even a template that folks can use to better organize and think about the organization of their structure prior to diving in?
I don't, off the top of my head, I think, Max, did you suggest yesterday you might have something that you could share?
I do. I mean, yes, there's definitely quite a bit of knowledge around this. I've spent a number of years helping people to do this. Yeah, a lot of time comes up when you start big projects, your migrations. We have a bit of planning. So I do have a spreadsheet which I have, and I can give you a bit of a view if you like. I'm going to make a sanitized version of it so we can give it to everyone to use. I suppose it covers all of this. I would have to stop sharing and I would have to open up a new window, just give an idea quickly, and happy for the audience to tell me if they're interested in this. So for principles, yeah, there is quite a few things that you could consider for principles, and usually have to discuss as a prompt to get everybody to understand. So, things like, segmentation is important, right? So the segmentation for the librarians here, I think we had somebody who mentioned the L word. So the librarians will have to understand this. So there's a certain aspect of kind of segmentation of content. So it's a big spreadsheet, yes, but this definitely kind of gives you a bit of an insight of the things you have to do, So segregating content into, brands, you have your sites, then you have your language masters, which you have to do. And then I have this spreadsheet where I actually start planning all the content hierarchy to give it a feel for how things are going to be laid out. And then you can start actually planning out where they're going to be going and how they're going to be structured. So definitely happy to share this. I also go to a point where I start to plan out the pages and look at the structure of the pages, which is also kind of gives you an idea where it goes. I have a very big kind of focus on managing component architecture. Yeah, so where the components going, how they're going to go to components, and then you actually linking them and to pages, and for example, having these kind of help structures to give you an idea where does the page fit and how it's going to appear. Yeah. So for example, here you have you have content within the content architecture, and then you also have content which is going to be used for information architecture, because there's obviously quite a big kind of connectivity between how you're going to use the content but how you're going to store it, because how you're going to store it is going to mean a lot long term, right? So definitely I'm happy to share this with you guys. I'll make it over the next few days and I'll release it next week. We'll get the team to review it so we see what else we can add to it. But yeah, essentially this allow you to start planning up front and get everyone in your teams from a business perspective and the organization perspective to just get a bit of a visibility of this, how you. When you want to hit the AEM, you want to start putting stuff in, yeah. And when you let teams to go off and create the content on their own, it's going to be very hard for you to remove it and move it along. So you want to really have a bit of a plan and a role play ahead of time. And the only way of doing it I found has been a spreadsheet.
Nice, yeah. And Srini was really interested in that spreadsheet.
Yeah.
Maybe that's something we can put up on the Champion site in due time.
Yes. Yep.
Can I add a question on top of that?
Of course.
Like thinking about like globally, like that spreadsheet, are you just looking at like, I guess, like one instance, or like that could work globally for multiple different instances?
Oh, it goes by brand, by site,
Right.
by language. So language masters do that global aspect to it. Yeah. So you're
Mhm.
starting to actually
Right.
think about ahead of time, because it's a hierarchy, right? So you have to,
Mhm.
you kind of got to get the content architecture principles bang on at the start. And you don't
Mhm.
want to skip out. Like I've seen some implementations where the content team decided to not include the language part of the tree.
Mhm.
They decided not to include the sites. They decided not to
Yeah.
do the location, the locale. Yeah, but the locale and the
Right.
language is important for releasing new like language masters and doing translations, for example. Yeah. So my principles always usually say don't skip out on layers within your
Yeah.
hierarchy. You'd rather have more than
Right.
less,
Yeah,
because
definitely.
adding them later is going to be harder. And it's like, well, I don't want to see AU and AU everywhere. Yeah, but when you gonna want it, it's going to be very hard to add it and retrofit the old content, because as you make content and you relate it to each other, it's going to be hard to undo it later on. So
Right.
Yeah, and the danger is you're going to ruin your SEO if you start fiddling around with URLs later and that kind
Right.
of thing.
Right,
You get into redirect hell, and you just end up having to Whereas actually,
Mhm.
if you bake that in from the beginning, let's think about the end state goal. If maybe we're only going to have one language in this site, but the other languages have got multiple languages, then let's have languages everywhere, because the likely
Mhm.
future is that one language site might become a multi-language site anyway. And adding that language free in is not going to be easy if you're trying to retrofit it later. Whereas actually, it's much
yeah,
easier to bake it in from the beginning.
yeah, exactly. And
Right.
it doesn't hurt you. Plus, if you remove languages, yeah, a lot of the like when you're doing kind of a content releasing within it, the features in AEM rely on that hierarchy. So if you remove that, those features won't work. So there's another
Yeah.
problem. Like if you do blueprints
Right.
and so forth, yeah, they kind of expect to have certain languages in there. But
Right.
yeah, if you don't have them, you're gonna have troubles.
Thanks.
Yeah, those are great topics. I know we have a couple of questions. Well, actually, one on that I see some interest on Universal Editor. Before we do that, I wanted to address a pre-submitted question that I'm going to post in the chat here. And I think Jessica was going to talk to us about her experience with this kind of question, the nature of this question. How would you approach a highly customized AEM on-prem application and convert it to the Adobe Experience Manager as a cloud service?
Yeah, great question. It's actually something my company's like currently going through. So I actually reached out to some developers on our end and was just kind of looking at like our own method that we're kind of going through.
Mm-hmm.
It's really hard with on-prem, like we're currently there, and I don't know if you guys are, but like we have a lot of custom components and static templates, so it's
Mm-hmm.
it's a little challenging to migrate over. So just like a couple of notes that our developers are kind of walking through is like removing unnecessary things in AEM, running an audit on our current like custom components and current templates that like really need to be migrated over. Obviously, utilizing and creating editable templates and leveraging those core components. And then slowly but surely, once kind of all that, I guess, discovery or research phase of understanding what needs to be migrated over, then re-implementing those custom components and migrating. I know Experience League has a great, they always are such a great resource, but there's obviously like AEM as a cloud service migration journey, and they kind of have different phase approaches on that experience that I can link to. But also, even at Adobe Summit, I attended some really great sessions on Cisco recently went from on-prem to cloud service as well. And they had 2 sessions of the same title, but they were kind of broken down into different, they kind of talked about it in different ways and showed how they tackled it. So I thought that was a really good resource as well that I'll try to link to in the chat.
Gotcha. Yeah, thank you, Jessica. Yeah, just wanted to address the yeah, go ahead.
So just adding to that point, like normally how we approach the on-prem like complex implementation to AEM as a cloud service. So your discovery phase has to start as initial point of it, where Adobe has provided a best practice analyzer. There are few tools are available. What you can actually do is like if you are have no clue where to start and how to start and all, just install the best practice analyzer, which is present in the software distribution. I can ping you that link as well. So install it in your on-prem application, that package, and then you actually run that best practice analyzer report, right? So it will run for some time. Even it will take, based on your repository structure, it will take some hours as well. Once it's done, and you can also, if you have access to Experience Cloud, you can import that into the Experience Cloud, where it will give you like how your complexity, it will measure the complexity, and it will tell whether you have how much customization you have, which are all the things are critical, which need to be solved immediately in order to move to cloud. Or it will also tell saying that like these things, yes, it is an info. You can take it even later as well. So based on that, you can judge. It will help you to judge, saying that like how complex your system and how you can plan, and you can also see saying that how long it will take in order to migrate.
I can also do a kind of 2 points on how would you approach it. I think the best, if you have customized that, basically the pathway is you go upgrade it to the latest on-prem, so 6.5 Service Pack 99. It's not, but it's 13 or 14 already, yeah. And then you say, okay, I'll build out of that. Then you go from that, you move your app into the new cloud-ready archetype. So essentially, what you need to do is you need to first upgrade all your code to basically work on 6.5 latest Service Pack, and then I would just take all the core out and stick it into a brand new archetype. It could be some modules, but you essentially want to rip out all your stuff the way you've done it in the 6.5 and do it the right way in the cloud. And that's part of your pathways. And then you deploy that into a container, and you want to put it into a container. Yeah. We have some examples of how to run containers and dispatcher using the new way of everything new way. Yeah. And that's basically the only way of doing it. Anything else, you're just going to struggle. So you go from your current code base into latest AEM 6.5, and then from that you just reorganize everything into brand new, from scratch archetype, cloud ready archetype. And then you can run, if you can run it on containers, then you'll be fine on SaaS. You don't have to do too much either. There's a question over there about how do you add third-party jars. During that process, you will go in and add them as B&D dependencies, which will be baked into your jar file. So you can add them. Your third-party jars should be published, like Maven. You can put them into GitHub repository if you wanted to for your or whatever. If you can't get them into Maven, because it's pretty hard to get into Maven thing, it's just big jumps. But you can put it in GitHub, and then you can just load it as you would normally include dependencies into your Java project. Thanks, Greg.
Yeah, thanks for addressing that question from Rajarshi, Max. And there was one question about if there's something like equivalent to the weekend project for the universal editor. There's a sample app, I guess, on GitHub. I'm not sure if there were any other comments on that, if there's any other sample implementations that you're aware of, like the weekend project. But there was a link that was provided, the GitHub link there on the chat.
Well, funny enough, if you look at David Nuschler's GitHub account, you will find so many examples. If you go to his GitHub, he's basically all he's been doing last 2 years is making up sample Franklin projects.
For
So yeah, if you want examples, go over there and you can just fill your boots.
David Nuschler's GitHub.
Yeah. I was on it today, awesome. Going, wow, well done, David. By the way, David Nuschler is the father of AEM, or godfather of AEM.
Yeah, think of content first. Yeah. Will performance, there's a question in the chat, will performance improve if the integration between AEM and Target is on the server side versus the client side? I don't know if anyone wants to take that on. Yeah.
Well, I guess in theory it depends. Yeah. I guess the advantage of if you do it on the server side is you can potentially you can potentially do things sort of more quickly. The issue you're having with obviously with Target depends what specifically you're doing with Target, because if you are doing personalization, then effectively that implies you can't cache that content, or you can't cache it in the middle layer. So you can't then leverage CDN caching or that kind of thing, because effectively you're creating at the server side a personalized thing that the end user then has to retrieve. So effectively you need to think about what are you actually doing with Target that you're going to do on the server side. Is that something that then can be cached in any way? And you might be able to do some things where if you're caching for specific groups or those kind of things, if you can base it on something about the request, then you might be able to do that at the CDN layer to then have effectively multiple cache versions of those things. But potentially it's a sort of a trade-off effectively between whether you do it client side and effectively you're putting all the load into the client, and those things effectively they have to interact with multiple services to get the additional content, or whether you push it to the server side and then effectively you can't cache it in the middle, you can only cache it at the client side. Gotcha. So it's kind of you're balancing off different trade-offs of both ways of doing it.
Yeah, it does make sense. Yep. All right. Let's see how we're doing on time. We got 20 more minutes. If folks want to stick like 5 minutes extra, that's great too. We're going to move to some tips pretty soon in the next minute or so. So another question pop up here in meeting chat. Does SDI pretty much need to be used on any component with personalization? That's a question from Brian.
Not really. If you ask me, like SDI is particularly used when you are actually when you're having a content which is more of like not to be cached at all, right? So the content for the personalization can be cached somewhere. For example, like in our use cases, we see saying that we have a loyalty members where you have platinum, gold, or silver. That is more of like a context-based personalization, right? So if someone is logged in, that is purely of a service where you will identify which context he is belong to, and the content for that particular platinum member or the gold member can be cached somewhere else, right? So there are multiple ways you can implement personalization, right? Someone like scroll down at that time, you can call an Ajax and get the content based on what you are understanding about the customer, and then you can load your components accordingly as a lazy load. It is not always meant to be have an SDI. SDI is a very costly operation. For example, in sometimes like the page itself has to be personalized. In such cases, we cannot make an entire page into an SDI, right? Which will anyway will impact your cache offload ratio. So you always think of like how when you develop something in AEM, always think as a best practice that how I'm going to cache this page, entire page, like cache as much as you can. That's how you can offload your content.
Yeah, that's good advice.
Wondering
And
if we have
always and always a separate content and functionality as separate together, right? So that's the way to do a best practice.
Robert, I wonder if we have any Target or Adobe Launch Champions programs. We can also bring in some cross-pollination here for the questions.
Yeah, I'm sure he's jumped off the call for real quick,
Okay,
but
right.
yeah, we
You
can
can watch it
definitely
afterwards.
suggest that. Yeah, suggest that to Robert. Yeah, let's take one more of the questions here from Yeluri. How can we optimize AEM client libs loading on web pages, particularly on mobile device experiences? I mean, that's
I can add to that if you want. I suppose.
Yeah.
Client side libraries. Well, there's out-of-the-box functionality for structuring your and orchestrating your client-side libraries. And I see it a lot of times. People, what they do is they use a front-end project and they would kind of create a kind of one big blob of JavaScript or CSS and they whack it in and show it on a page. And then over time, what happens? You just have lots of these. Yeah. I usually stick on the side of using the out-of-the-box JavaScript. I kind of break down. So you create bundle libraries, and then you slowly but surely keep adding kind of component specific JavaScript, CSS, and then namespace. Yeah. And then from that, you can create a nice structure of what you deliver into a page. Yeah. If you do it other ways, yeah, you'd have to, I suppose, in when you're doing it with using front-end projects, if you use the latest archetype, there's a UI front-end project that can, create you a nice minified code base. Yeah. So you could do that as well. Yeah. There's basically two ways to going about it. Yeah, you can either do it yourself, which I highly encourage because you'll learn lots more from it, or you can try to get the front end library to it for you.
Yeah, and I guess the main thing is how you set up your library. So you're effectively bundling into as few libraries as you can, at least for the client download. So then you're gonna end up with less individual objects to download for the client. But yeah, I guess there's the decision internally as to how do you structure your project so that you can actually code it and it doesn't just turn into a sort of a nightmare mess of files.
Okay.
Well,
I can give one tip. Go ahead.
No, go for it.
Okay, I can give one tip on that. When you think about an AEM client lib, right, instead of loading everything all together, always think like what is it important for the first rendering, right? That alone you have to load it on the initial load of the page, where rest of the JavaScript, which are all rest of the client libs, you can make it as a async. Right, there is a transformation. There's a lot of customization scripts are available over internet where you can see saying that as part of the load of the client lib, you can define an attribute called async equal to true. If you do that, what will happen is only the necessary JavaScript will be like occupy that main thread, where rest of the JavaScript, which will automatically go as an asynchronous, which won't impact your rendering. So that way you can improve your mobile device speed. So that's one tip I can give.
Yeah, very good. I'll add to that as well. I suppose, you saw in the last 5, 6, 7, 10 years almost, yeah, there's been a lot of move towards JavaScript frameworks and so forth. Yeah, I would say that you can't beat just raw HTML with plain CSS. Yeah, so you can never beat it. It's just impossible. Yeah, so if you want to fast loading pages, you remember the AMP project and there's a few other ones. Yeah, just simply have HTML with CSS and you will be so fast and it's going to be working on mobile devices. Any kind of post loading JavaScript page manipulation, it's gonna slow your page down. So if you just have raw HTML, you're gonna win. And AEM is really, if you think about it, yeah, exactly. Well, in the AEM natively, it was built for that. It was built for having raw HTML. Yeah, it's just when we start adding all this kind of JavaScript delay to it, you starting to have slow and mobile devices suffer. But if you just peel back everything that we've done in the last 10 years and you look at, okay, well, how are you supposed to do AEM? Well, it just simply spits out raw HTML and JavaScript and CSS, and then you can't beat, yeah. So you should go back to basics a bit and you'll be fine.
Gotcha. And thank you, Martin, for answering Bhavesh's question. And the chat, on a related note, talking about HTML, raw HTML, CSS, with content fragments, we have a question from Shiju. Regarding personalization, is it possible to use AEM content fragments in Adobe Target?
Yeah, I think with the recent release, I think content fragment is also supported to push to Target along with experience fragments. I am not very sure about which release service pack it started supporting, but it is definitely yes. With the recent service pack, it is started supporting content fragments as well.
Gotcha. Yeah, I've seen it somewhere as well. And it depends how you're pushing content fragments out to Target with your Target integration. I guess we can, if you guys are okay, we can move on to the tips section. Unless there was any other questions that were pressing. And I know we have a couple of tips lined up here. We're going to go to Max to provide tips on how to manage, bring your own development practices on AEM as a service.
Very cool. Yeah, I think this question comes up quite a bit, and I suppose we're trying to dedicate some time to it. We got our own GitHub organization, so we'll set up some examples for this of how to do it. Fundamentally, the approach for a lot of organizations to have their own Git repositories should be basically the same. Yeah, you maintain your code in your GitHub repository. You use your typical Git flow to manage that. So you have your branches and you kind of do your PRs and so forth. Yeah. And then you have essentially what I call environment branches here. So you have master or main, and then you have your developer branch. You can have a UAT branch into which you merge your changes, and then then what you do is set up pipelines on your Git repository. So most Git repositories now, like GitHub and say GitLab or Bitbucket, support pipelines. And you set up essentially a small pipeline which will just take the code and push it to a branch within Adobe Git. Yeah, so that you do all of your kind of the software development lifecycle and management of what should go in where on your own Git, and then you push that into environment branches, and then you have your main, you have develop, you have your stage, whatever, and then you set up your pipelines within SaaS to say, okay, anytime code comes into this pipeline, deployed to an environment. Yeah, and that'll make your life so much easier. Because essentially what you have in the SaaS side, the infrastructure and configuration as code. Think of it like that. Yeah, it's not meant to be your management for your code. It's for configuration. Yeah, so you gotta, a lot of people come up and say, hey, why don't we have like visual UI for managing branches within Adobe? It's like, that's not what it's for. It's just infrastructure. It's back office stuff, right? So yeah, you do it all in the front end. And then you use the Adobe Git as basically put the code in here, deploy it to an environment. Yeah. I also cover a couple of things in there when you do the migrations and you do any kind of work. There is a few questions coming up about those GI configs and run modes. Yeah, so although a lot of on-premise implementations have like a lot of run modes, there's basically a set amount of run modes within AEM SaaS. That's for a good reason, yeah, because you just minimize the complexity, for one. Two, it allows you to review all your run mode usage and configurations you have in there and move them into the new OSGI JSON configurations, which leverage environment variables, right? Because in reality, you got, like, I think the way we use run modes is probably a bit of an overkill, yeah? You could potentially have just simple flat structure of configurations with environment variables basically replacing what you would need to have a lot of files for you typically. Yeah, the typical projects you'll see there's lots of different repeating configurations everywhere, but you don't need to do that in reality. If you simply have one configuration and environment variables, and then you add those inside the console in SAS, it will do that and more for your management practice, for your operational, and the sanity of looking at the configuration folder with like hundreds of configuration files. Yeah, so I suppose that's the practices the way I see it. Anybody else wants to add something?
Yeah, just adding to Max things, like I'm second to that. Like when you think about run mode, like you have more run modes. More environment variable is one option. There is also another option called context-aware configurations, right? So which is also an out-of-box feature, like which is underutilized by many of the developers, right? Which is also more powerful, where you can manage your configuration even in the hierarchy level, like from global, site level, even a component level. So that way you can manage it more and try to move away from customized run modes more and more, right? So that's where the AEM is going towards.
Yeah.
Well, if we're going to talk about the content repository patterns, you can also look at cloud configurations, because that's also underutilized here. I suppose the OSGI configurations is about having a centralized single point service management, right? So, if that's what you want, fair enough, yeah. If you have a services that rely on content, yeah, I mean, cloud configuration is also a great way of doing it. You actually have this separate kind of pattern of, okay, you're gonna set up the configs, then you feed them onto different places. If you want it centralized, yeah, context aware is going to be per site, which is even better. It's what you want to do.
Yeah.
I'll just say people aware, I've just pinged a link in the chat to the Experience League docs around use of environment variables in cloud service.
Yeah, thank you, Martin. All right. There was one question. I know we're jumping back and forth between tips and questions, but is there a nice visual smart editor for Dispatcher, vhost, and Farm, and any files? I don't think I've seen that.
Yes. Yeah. Visual Studio Code.
Visual Studio Code.
Oh, obviously. Yeah. Yeah, you could go that way.
Now the reason it is suppose if you think about Dispatcher, it is a module written for Apache. Yeah, and Apache is about, I don't know, 30, 40 years old. Yeah, it's as old as the internet, right? So yeah, they haven't discovered it back then, and they haven't discovered it until now. So it probably won't happen, right? So it's just gonna continue doing text files.
Yeah.
Just gotta stay old school.
Sorry to interfere.
Yeah.
My name is Sorin. That question was from my side. If I can add a small thing to that, the reason I asked that question was because, like, back in the days when I was working on other kind of technologies, we had this small UI called Apache-GUI, which is a Windows desktop small app that would give you all these visual nice representation of a vhost configuration file, right? So I was wondering if that is still maintained or if there is anything new on the market. In addition, completed with stuff that is actually specific to Dispatcher, like any file and Farm. And in my opinion, it would be great, but I haven't seen yet, so maybe it was only me. That's why I asked.
Yeah, maybe there's an opening for an open source project there.
Yeah, that's true.
Maybe we're using some NTLR tools to language recognition and implement something that would be really great.
I think it's one of those things. There's definitely the scope to build something. I guess probably the main thing is the audience for it is probably fairly small, and so yeah, there isn't necessarily particularly if it's like AEM Dispatcher specific, that whereas like a more general Apache config one there's probably a wider audience, whereas the AEM Dispatcher sort of user base is probably a lot smaller, and so there isn't necessarily quite so much demand or that kind of thing. It feels like it definitely isn't something Adobe are probably going to build, but yeah, maybe there is an open source project that could come out to give some help on that.
Yeah, Soren, is also another thing. The Dispatcher module is closed source, right? So hence, because it's closed source, hence you didn't see anybody else taking up the mantle to build it. You would have to really, I mean, I always thought about doing something smart for it. I mean, I kind of been using it for a long time and reverse engineer a lot of the functionality. You probably could build one, but it'll take time from someone to provide all that knowledge.
Yeah, and I guess the danger is because being a closed source thing, you're kind of locked into you don't really know what's going to change, and if something changes within the dispatcher module itself, you could easily, your tool becomes redundant, or you're going to have to make changes after the fact, because you're only going to know about them when they release it, when they release a new config option or they make a change.
Yeah, too volatile to, yeah. Thanks.
But if you build one, let us know. We'll add it in. We'll maybe test it for you.
Yeah, this is the group to pitch in here. Yeah.
Yeah.
Something related to personalization and target. One question that was submitted by Brian Longeland, and I know we have 2 minutes, but feel free to stay over whomever can, and then we'll wrap it up. Target and personalization. A lot of clients are licensed, but they're not using it. What's the best push to get them to take advantage of target personalization, and any big wins with personalization that we could share with Brian?
Yeah, so we are AEM champions, but anyway, I am also certified in Adobe Target. I can give you some tips on that, right? So what you can actually do is like how we go about it is we actually do a baby step where first of all, like there is an out-of-box segments are already available within Target, right? You don't need to redefine the entire thing, where it will always have demography based or geography based or mobile, tablet. There is multiple out-of-box segments are available, right? Based on that, you can try with an A/B test where you can lower the traffic to say 30% and do a small change, and then there is a visual composer, which is an out-of-box tool which is available within Target itself. So you can actually, even a business or marketing team knows like where they can do a small changes, and then they can try it out using an A/B test, right? So that is where they can see how the report, like which test perform better and how it is getting converted into a generation. That way you can showcase it, saying that how it benefit to the organization, and then slowly start building your segments into Target, and then take it from there.
Yeah, the other thing I was going to just share. Sorry, go ahead, Jess.
I was just gonna say, like with the small changes, like just on the top of my head, like just small content changes, like working with the content team or the marketing team and trying to figure out where could be just tiny changes, even on like a button or something like that, to start small.
Yeah, and I was just going to share a link in the chat. Rob and I actually had a session at Experience Makers Live in 2022, where we were talking about delivering highly personalized content. And I'll share that. There's some kind of insights similar to this, and the critical thing I think really is the recommendation is just get stuck in and do something, because the biggest thing that you end up with is, because you want to be perfect and you want to do hyper personalization day one, it's never going to happen. The reality is you need to do some amount of personalization, and then you'll do more personalization, and then you'll do more, and then you'll do hyper personalization, and that you're never going to do that day one, and that you just need to actually get started and kind of get over the initial hurdle of actually doing it, and then you'll kind of build it from there and learn as you go, and sort of do more and more as you go on.
Yeah, that's good approach, Martin. That makes sense. I guess yeah, we can take one more. We're just over the half-hour mark here, but we have one more question about scenarios where CACs would be a better fit than Sling feature flags, and vice versa. Soren is asking all the hard questions today.
Sorry about that.
No, that's okay. If we don't get to, just note on the questions, documenting all of the questions in our spreadsheet. So if we don't cover them today, we'll cover them next time. So we keep keeping tabs of all the questions.
Yep, I'm gonna copy that.
Some scenarios where CAC will be better Sling features, yeah, flag, yeah. Well, I suppose, yeah, if you're using Sling features in SaaS, if you look at the way SaaS works, Sling features is something that you basically built into building of an image for deployment in cloud, yeah. Or if you're going to be doing any kind of like the new age of Sling, where you create Sling feature and it compiles you this application job with all the files in it, right? If you think about it, when you create a component in AEM, or its feature, and you deploy it into an instance, it's sitting there. You don't need to have any Sling feature. You haven't used it. You haven't added to any page. So it's like native feature. So I mean, yeah, if you look at the kind of the patterns that the feature flags kind of existed on, where you actually kind of run a feature and it has two the same code to the same code on it, and you want to run different one. Well, I suppose I would probably think that in AEM you probably avoid doing that because you make it much more complicated for you. Yeah, AEM is about authors doing stuff. So if you're making versions of components, that's what you'll be focusing on and doing that. If you have versions of kind of services, just make separate services and versions, yeah, and you have components linked to those, right? Which also I can't think of many reasons why you would do that, yeah. You really kind of keep it simple. You got to think when you're building the container for an instance, it's ethereal, right? It just gets built and it's installed, right? Providing multi-toggable features, you're not going to expose this to the authors, so I'm not sure you need to focus on them for the container, because really you're just going to deploy everything as is. Just keep it simple, I suppose.
Yep.
Martin, Bangladesh, anybody else want to add something to it?
So yeah, makes sense.
That's awesome,
Yeah,
guys. Thank
that
you.
makes sense.
Thank you, everyone. I think we'll wrap it up. Just want to make sure that everyone knows that this recording, as well as previous ones, are going to be up on our AEM User Group YouTube channel, the Adobe Experience Manager Champion Office Hours. And again, feel free to scan those QR codes to go to our Champion Office Hours website to stay abreast of any upcoming meetings. We try to have those once every month, so you might see one coming up by mid-end July, if we can swing it. And feel free to review the previous user group YouTube channels and or recordings. And thank you again for joining us today. And we'll hope to see you in one of these office hours the next time. Everyone, have a great time, and see you online. Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Bye,
Thanks,
everyone.
folks.
Bye, thank you.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, guys.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.